All right, just a couple of editorial things here. Let me get this thing going. I've my editing software has changed the way it works, so I can no longer control how to edit a video after I've done it. So I have to be like ready to go. And now I'm like adjusting the everything so I am not decapitated. Okay, all right. I think that's going to be it. I am here and ready. So what I'm going to address today in this particular episode is the topic of what's often called tinnitus. It depends on how you want to pronounce it. It's called that way variously depending on what side of the pond you happen to be on. And I've got it. I've had it. And I assume if you're watching this, it's because you're familiar with it and you have it too. So for those who don't understand what it is, it's the ringing sound that's in the ear. It's the high-pitched, buzzing, ringing frequency that is often heard within the ear. And when it first happened to me, I didn't anticipate it. I didn't expect it. And I'll go into that a little bit, but I thought it was a medical situation. So I had it checked out with my doctor, my physician, and I had it checked by an audiologist to see whether it was something concerned with hearing loss, something of that nature. And it turned out there was no physiological reason. So what I want to do today is to talk about this and to perhaps reframe it in a way that might let you accept it, come to terms with it, no longer resist it, and perhaps even befriend it and recognize that it's a gift. Those things are possible. So let me share my story and we'll see how you can relate yours. So once upon a time back in 2008, I was going through a lot at the time. There was a lot of stress in my life. I was questioning my beliefs. I had come out of a conservative Christian perspective, and I wanted truth. I wanted truth at all costs. I had had what I later came to call or to understand to be a Kundalini experience. And you can find that particular blog post if you look back through my archives. I think it's a two-parter, because I went on and on and on and on as I am wont to do. And you can find that one if you want to know more about that. But basically, I wanted truth more than I wanted anything. And so my beliefs started following like dominoes, one by one by one. And in the middle of this, there became a certain point when I came to the awareness that I no longer believed in the doctrine of conscious eternal torment in hell after we die. I came to see that as a humanly fabricated mythology. And once that particular logjam fell, everything processed rather quickly after that. That fear was holding me in its grip. And once that was released, everything else kind of fell into place. So it was about that time I had come to the conclusion that I no longer believed in hell, and that the Bible was no longer my life authority. And this was after 30 years of believing in both. So here I was in a meeting with a group of people. My former husband and I had been groomed to take over a healing ministry. And it was a wonderful ministry, and we were gung-ho about it, and I believed in it completely. But they were concerned because I no longer believed in hell, and apparently that was a requirement. So they invited me and some others to be in this meeting. And at the very moment that they asked me what my current beliefs were, and I uttered the words out loud for the first time before anyone outside of me, I no longer believe in the doctrine of hell. and the Bible is no longer my authority. At that very instant, I suddenly heard this loud, ringing, all-encompassing sound. It took over my system, my being. It eclipsed everything else in the room. And I looked around and I said, "What is that? What is that?" And nobody else could hear it but me. And it was about all I could hear. It drowned out almost everything else. Was with me night and day. And for the next 3 nights, I could barely sleep. The sound permeated my everything. And I would be lying there in my bed trying to sleep, and I couldn't. And I was concerned. And I was thinking all kinds of things like, okay, this could be stress. This could be, we had just had a whirlwind airplane extravaganza where we had flown to New York City. We were on a national television show about, it's an entirely different topic, about Christians who actually like sex. And I wish I still had access to that video, but I do not. It was the Mike and Juliet show, and we were in New York City to film that. And unfortunately, it was taken down off of YouTube. But we flew there, we flew back, and we had this meeting. So I was thinking, I don't know, jet lag, being up in the air that long, the whole whirlwind activity of that particular event. I was thinking awful things like, oh my God, what if I'm really sick? What if this is Meniere's disease, or I'm losing my hearing, or brain tumor, you know, because we make that fatal leap into brain tumor. Some of us do with the slightest headache. All I knew is that something was truly happening that was different, and I didn't know what to do about it. So I took myself to my primary care physician. He did blood work. He referred me to an audiologist who told me that there was no physiological reason for me to have this, and perhaps there was some stress in my life. I'm like, yeah, you think so? I'm maybe excommunicated from my spiritual community for the second time within 4 years. Maybe that could be stressful. Maybe kind of. And all I know is the sound continued with me. I learned to live with it in that adaptive way that we humans learn to live with anything we have to learn to live with. So I wouldn't say I was at peace with it. I still didn't know what it was, what was causing it, but I couldn't find any answers. So I learned to sleep. I learned to live with it. And I noticed that this sound, it was always there. I could always find it. I could always tune into it, so to speak, but I wasn't always aware of it. It became background noise. And if something else was distracting me, then it didn't showcase. But if I wanted to find it, I could tune into it without any effort whatsoever. And sometimes it would ramp up in pitch or volume, and it would really get my attention. And oddly enough, sometimes lights would flicker at the same time that it would do that revving thing. There were other times I could hear almost like a Morse code tapping on the bone underneath and slightly behind my left ear. And I was noticing all of these things, and I was trying to not feel entirely too crazy about all these things. And fast forward a bit, I continued to do my questioning of all of my beliefs. And the day came when I was invited to speak at a conference, which was filled with other people who were doing a lot of questioning of their beliefs, particularly Christian beliefs. So I flew down to Texas and checked into the motel and attended this conference. And I heard several people speaking. There was one woman who I later became friends with. She did a lovely presentation about some really challenging issues in her own life. And then it was my turn, and I got up to speak. Now, I didn't mention this ringing sound. I mean, why would I mention this ringing sound? It was kind of bizarre, and I didn't have an explanation for it. So I gave my story about some of the things I'd been doing and seeing and witnessing and experiencing in my spiritual deconversion at that time. And when everyone was done speaking, this one woman came up to me and she said, "You need to check out this book." And she called the book The Ringing Sound. She told me I needed to read it. And I thought, well, that's interesting. because I hadn't said a word about the ringing sound. And she was calling it the ringing sound, not tinnitus or tinnitus or however you've heard it pronounced. It felt important. So I checked out the book on Amazon. And the cover of the book got my attention because on the cover of the book was the great sitting Buddha in Japan. Now, every time I see this Buddha, it gets my attention. It's one of those symbols that really speaks to me. Way back in time when I was a little girl, I was age 4 to age 6. I lived in Japan. My father was a military officer in the army, a JAG officer, and he was stationed at Camp Zama, Japan, Sagamihara, Japan, back in the mid to late 60s. So I lived there, and it's a different story. Maybe it'll be a separate episode, but when I was 4 years old, Sean Connery told me to pee. Yeah, that's to be a teaser for a future episode. But while I was in kindergarten at Camp Zama, our kindergarten class went to visit the Great Sitting Buddha for a field trip. And like good little military dependents, we formed a line and we stayed in line and we were told stay in line. And I'm the kind of person my whole life who doesn't necessarily stay in line. And when we came back behind the Buddha, I saw an open arched doorway. And I don't remember anyone stopping me because I broke out of line and I went into that door and I saw this bamboo ladder that led up to a platform that led to some stairs that went all the way up to the top of the Great Sitting Buddha. I mean, this thing is like 5 stories tall. It's huge. And when I got all the way up there, I looked out the third eye window. I got in a lot of trouble, but I'm pretty sure it's worth it. So since then, every time I see an image of the Great Sitting Buddha, I know the universe is trying to get my attention. There are some other symbols in my life, but that's one of the meaningful ones. So on the cover of this book, the ringing sound was the Great Sitting Buddha. And I went on to read this book. I devoured this book because it was describing what I was experiencing. It talked about the physiological aspects of it and the ethereal aspects of it, etc. And it described the sound in a way that I was experiencing it, but I couldn't put words to it. So the sound comes down, comes into the left ear, and it goes through the brain, including the pineal gland at the center of the base of the brain, and it exits out the right ear and then goes up, forming this loop, this continuous loop all the time. And I envisioned when it was going through my brain, imagine 5 strands of the musical staff. It was going through my brain like that, like lines, but kind of buzzy. And I heard this chord. And it wasn't like necessarily a beautiful musical chord. It's rather discordant, but it's got several different pitches all at one time, like a very complex discordant chord. And it did that loop all the time, all the time. So what this book went on to reveal to me is that it is a form of meditation that is highly sought after by Tibetan Buddhist monks. They try for years, for decades, to achieve this continuous conversation with the universe. And here I was, this neophyte, this person who was questioning everything, and it came upon me at the moment I made a public declaration of what I no longer believed in, and therefore what I was open to. And it's never left me since then. It's always with me. I hear it right now, right now. And when it ramps up in either pitch or volume, I know I am to tune in and pay attention to what's currently happening when it gets my attention. I love that the universe knows how to communicate with me, with you, with anyone. There are a myriad of ways in which the universe communicates. The only question is always, are we tuned in? Are we listening? Are we paying attention? So my agreement with the universe is that when it gets my attention with whatever, I pay attention. I open myself up to whatever it is it wants to communicate to me. And I don't always cognitively know. Often it bypasses my mental body and goes right into my somatic body and my emotional body, often to my vibrational body. Because what this sound current, this ringing sound, is actually a vibration. I once had somebody play for me an audio of the sound of the vibration that is heard within the Great Pyramid in Egypt. And it was the same pitch, the same discordant chord I was hearing in my own being. Because it's not just in my ears, it's always there. So when people say, oh, you should meditate, I'm always meditating. It's never away from me. I just get to tune in. And when people say to close your eyes and receive whatever message you need to receive, it's always there. Always. It went from crazy, scary, potential brain tumor thingy to really cool Tibetan monk meditation thingy right when I read that book. The book is still available. It's on Amazon. You can find it yourself. It's called The Ringing Sound. The name of the author escapes me at the moment. I'm not getting any benefits from this. I don't have any sponsors. I'm just sharing all of these things whenever I get the impulse to share them. But if you have tinnitus, or the ringing sound, it might behoove you to look it up and change your narrative from the annoying, weird, problematic thing that you think you have into the rather amazing, invitational conversation with the universe that may actually be going on. You get to decide. You get to determine which is your truth. I know what I've chosen for me. Chosen? Chosen for me. Yeah. I love that I'm in continuous conversation with the universe. So there you go. That's what I have to say about that. Take care. Bye-bye.